Welcome to the Fantasy Football Clown Show. I'm the Fantasy Clown. I'm going to bring in my partner, Trader Dan, and today we're going to discuss the rookie running backs from 2023, kind of where we drafted them and what we thought about them pre-draft, and then where they are today as we, approach the playoffs in our fantasy leagues in Week 15, and maybe some of the misses, and we may even get some of our running back guru on our team is producer Brad, and he seems to draft lots and lots of running backs and always, kind of has a strong opinion. So we'll even kind of highlight some of his picks here as we go as well. But I think the consensus 101 in all of our drafts, no matter what, even when quarterback, centric leagues, was probably Bijan, right? Weren't we thinking Bijan?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, with Atlanta's run-heavy offense, the way they utilized Tyler Algier last year, I think that everyone kind of thought Bijan was, the consensus one, at least the consensus one back. I think we saw a couple of times a quarterback maybe had gone first, but for the most part, yeah, Bijan was 1.01, and
I know when I had the second pick and Bijan was there for me, I'd run to the board and put my sticker up and take Bijan number one.
There was no trades accepted.
Yeah, I think I was like, okay, that's good. That means quarterback hoarding works. That's what I said to myself. I think that means that if Bijan's number two, then this whole thing works. Now, as we look at 14 weeks of football in the NFL, are you happy with where Bijan is? Can you buy him for cheaper than last year's 101 now? Did he value or?
I don't know that you're gonna get him for 101 now. One, he's a year older. Two, he's played great, but he hasn't had those games or that run where it's like, oh wow, like this guy is the real deal. And I also think that there was a lot of doubt around the quarterback room this year, and I think that's another part of the reason why Bijan was there. I think if you put Bijan in this draft here, he's not the 101 this year in the draft. I think that would be Caleb Williams, and then I think you start to see guys like Marvin Harrison in the 102 conversation, and I don't think that Bijan would be the top pick. With that said, I would never regret picking him at 101. I still think he's young. He's still got that generational talent. He's still in that run heavy offense, and it looks like Arthur Smith got the message.
Let me ask you
this guy. What are you doing?
If you're in Dynasty, you're not in the playoffs. You have Bijan, or you have Christian McCaffrey. Would you trade away Christian McCaffrey for Bijan straight up, nothing different? Just boom. I'm going to trade Christian McCaffrey for Bijan.
If that guy was crazy enough to give up Bijan for Christian McCaffrey, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Okay. How about Jonathan Taylor for Bijan?
If I'm not in the playoffs, I do it because I get the 2 years. I get the 2 more years for production. And my philosophies on building. I don't build around running backs. I build then bring running backs in. So I would want the guy who I think in 2 years, if I got a good team, then philosophies change a little bit. But if I'm building, I want a guy that is 22, who I think's got the same potential as another guy at 25, even if he's not playing to that potential yet. And it depends, what kind of person you're dealing with. If the guy really wants Christian McCaffrey and he's willing to give up Bijan, I mean. How do you not take it?
I guess. And what about Breece Hall? Is Breece Hall for Bijan?
I still take Bijan only because Breece Hall with the consistent injury reports, their offense, even with Aaron Rodgers, we're not really sure what it is yet. Right. We talk about Robert Saleh's play calling and stuff like that, or some of the decisions anyway, maybe not the play calling, but it's just one of those things. Just give me Bijan. I have a feeling that he's going to be a 20-touch guy consistently week in, week out. He's got the build for a 3-down back. He's got the hands for the 3-down back. He's got he can run between the tackles. He can run outside the tackles. He can break tackles. He's going to be the real deal. I still think. That,
okay. So you're comfortable with him being that? Yeah. Probably the best, the RB1 in Dynasty. He's kind of the RB1 in your mind at this point. I guess safe to say. Now I'm gonna shoot whether you like Jahmyr Gibbs or him. I know producer Brad is a Jahmyr Gibbs fan. Brad, do you like Gibbs better than Bijan, or do you have Bijan ahead?
Just based on value, I think Bijan would be ahead, but personally, I'd take Gibbs's talent.
Sure. So, how about you, Dan? What do you think about Gibbs or Bijan?
No, I still stick with Bijan. And I say that because I think that with Monty in Detroit, it's more of a split backfield, and Monty gets a lot of the red zone touches. And I just think that the ceiling is going to be capped for Gibbs. He's going to have a good game, especially when he's the lead back. But I don't ever see Detroit going away from that dual threat back. I think that's important in football. But I just think it hurts the value of fantasy football.
Would it ever be the Saints of old with Drew Brees, and where there was always that lead back, which was like the Mark Ingram and those kind of guys, and then Kamara came onto the scene about by Kamara's third year, that he just kind of became this guy that was like now the all-purpose guy. Now there was always the Taysom Hill that would come in and do some whatever he do, and there'd always be the tight ends that would get the 3 receiving touchdowns, and Michael Thomas would get his, and there's always other people that got theirs. But it just feels a little bit like that Detroit deep offense. It feels a little bit like that to me, where I could see a world where Gibbs would really kind of be a Kamara, which there's a lot of points in the Kamara world when Kamara was in his prime. There's a lot of points there.
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, like Dan was saying, like he said he hasn't seen that, like the real deal type of games from Bijan yet. I feel like we've seen more from Gibbs even in that split backfield than Bijan this year, which kind of gives me that indication,
Yeah, I mean,
I can see why it is. Now, I'm probably still taking Bijan just because I think I always defer back to the NFL. I mean, it gets me in trouble because I had thought Rager was better than Jefferson. I mean, I kind of always defer to the NFL. Figure, I like Burks because I said the Titans traded A.J. Brown to the Eagles, for Burks straight up. But, I try to use that philosophy. So, I mean, I sort of feel like I err that way, but I'm saying, hey, the Falcons did take Bijan ahead of, they could have taken both guys, and they said, let's go this way. But I could see a world though where Gibbs does outplay him, and you kind of say to yourself, geez, that was but I too, I think I'm with you. How about Gibbs? Now that we're talking about Gibbs was kind of after the 3 quarterbacks, kind of the 5 spot, consensus there. Would you trade Gibbs, or would you trade CMC for Gibbs? Now, we said we would trade CMC for Bijan. I guess I'm trying to figure out, where does Gibbs in the dynasty world? Like, would you do that even up? Like, are we at a point where?
Again, that's going to come down to where I'm at in the league. If I have a chance to win, no, I keep CMC and go for it because he's RB. He's the RB1.
But I'm saying next year. Like next year, it's a new year. You don't know if you're going to be able to win. So we're right now. CMC, you're not in the playoffs, but and I'm giving you a trade deadline that's not passed yet. You're not in the playoffs this year, can't win this year, but 12 months from now, we don't know what is going to happen. Would you rather have CMC next year, or would you rather have Gibbs next year with the trades there?
I'm going to, I guess CMC touching the ball 350 times a year, something's eventually bad going to happen. So I guess I go Gibbs.
Okay.
I go Gibbs. In a redraft, I take CMC, but
okay. But just a tick after, and then So you're taking Gibbs. How about? Okay, so we're still at that point where we're actually taking the young guys over CMC.
Yeah.
So I guess there's not really, guess we're there. Looking down at the next running back was Zach Charbonnet. Is he what you thought he'd be? Like, I guess, has he taken as much of the Seattle backfield away from Walker as you thought, or are you feel like you're surprised?
Well, I kind of thought it would. In my opinion, it's going the way it is. It's more or less whoever's healthy is going to play. You know what I mean? And I think that Pete Carroll's going with I'm not going to just keep pounding one back and get them hurt, even though that seems to be what's happening as they're getting hurt. But I was never a huge fan of Charbonnet to begin with. In this spot, I thought there was Obviously, we're going to talk about the next running back who was better. And actually, I thought the guy who went fourth was actually probably going to be the second best running back in the draft. And I know I got my balls busted a little bit about it, but when he ran for 202 yards in his first game, I'm like, yes. And I had 0 shares of him.
Yeah, so I guess I will give you that. I didn't take very much Charbonnet either. I kind of feel like maybe he's better than I thought. I feel like he's performing better than maybe I envisioned. I too, on teams that I won with, that's where I got my Devin Ashane shares. So he was the fourth guy off the board. I mean, honestly, these guys, Charbonnet and Ashane, were like 201 picks in a 12-team league. They were just at the very end of the first or early second. And I was kind of taking them with that 112. So if I took him as a 114 in a team I won, a 14-team league I won. So, I took a couple shares of Shane. I was scared of the size. I know you told me I saw this guy. He's good. I can tell what's good at football. Last year before he got drafted, by Miami, you told me this guy's good at football. And I still remember it. And I said, but geez, Dan, he's like 5'8", 140 pounds. He's like that guy that for Dallas that can't do anything, like he's a little dude. But yeah, I mean, you nailed it. And so he's gotten hurt a couple times though.
Yeah, that was my concern.
Like, is it sustainable? Like, or is this the time to pump him out and get him gone because running backs only last 3 years anyway?
Well, that's so when we had talked about the running backs before the draft, and I said, don't be surprised if he's not, the second best guy that comes out of this draft. I meant that, but the reason why I never drafted him was the exact reason was I was afraid of the size. And I was like, man, if I'm going to be giving up a late first, early second for a guy, and I have doubts about his size, that's not good. There's no doubt about his talent. I still think whoever drafted him is tickled pink that they have him. But there's, you're going to have to know that he's never going to be the 3-down back. But he's just so good with the 12 to 15 touches that he gets that he's always going to be a double-digit fantasy producer guy. That offense is always in the red zone, and they put up a lot of points, even though they struggled a little bit. Well, they didn't struggle putting up points, but they lost. He's going to be a nice asset for the people who had drafted him in the second round. I don't think one person's going, man, I screwed up. I should have taken somebody different there.
I feel like I liked him in the end of the first because I feel like if you had a championship team, it's just kind of adding another piece to it.
Yeah.
And you already have a good team that won, so you're kind of okay. It's just replenishing the till. If you're drafting him at the top of the second, now you kind of have yourself in a dangerous spot because you're drafting. Your team is obviously not very good, and now you're drafting him, and you're taking a big lottery throw that he's going to be healthy, and you're counting on him to be a starter, and you can't repeat it. Now, having said that, I have a couple shares of him that I drafted on those championship teams, and one of the teams I did not return to the playoffs with, that 14-team league. So, I was short on running backs, and he couldn't even help me. I mean, that's how ridiculous it was. Like
a lot of injuries. He was injured quite often.
So I kind of look back and say, geez. And that's why I asked you about trading him away. I almost wonder if now value isn't – I mean, I got to wait for a big week for him, but I might be looking to actually move him, at a time when I think I can sell him high and see if I can get a Javonte Williams type, get something that I think is sustainable 3-down back, Rashad White type, somebody that I think is, kind of not this boomer bust 160-pound dude, and just if he becomes a superstar, then I guess, I was wrong. But, at least I got somebody that I think can help me 3 or 4 years in a row.
Yeah.
And, that kind of thing. So that's kind of my take on him. How about Kendry Miller? He was the fifth back off the board, 15th overall. Looks like he went from 10 to the 21 spot. So, tail end of the first round to the second round.
Well, he moved up the draft boards quick when everyone kind of heard about the suspensions going on with Kamara. So he moved up the draft board relatively quickly because I think people thought, he's going to get to start the first 4 games. And at that point, with an aging Kamara, and we've kind of, Kamara, I think, had some injuries last year, and I think that, with the suspension, and I think people were more or less thinking this is going to be the changing of the guards. Kamara come back and had a way different answer for them. He's a guy that you got to keep, right? You got to keep him. You can't sell him because you don't know really where he's at yet. And I think he didn't get the chance to start because he got injured, correct, in the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and I was just kind of going to take a peek and see.
Yeah, I believe he was hurt.
He's not available, so that means I was just looking at all my leagues.
Yeah, he's a guy you got to keep.
He's on every team. There's some redraft teams that he's available, right? So, he's not taken in redraft leagues, but in all the dynasty leagues that I'm in, he's on a team. I have 10 shares of him. So, I'm just kind of even looking at what my hold is on him. He's a guy that you have to hold, but yet I'm kind of disappointed. Like he feels like a Isaiah Spiller type to me. Like he feels like a guy that you take in the second round and he just, might be that. Might be never sees anything. I guess I feel a little bit.
It very well could be. I mean, especially if Kamara comes back next year and has a solid year. Now you got a guy who's going on his third year of his rookie contract. You know what I mean? And by the time you're kind of old news, and the new guys coming in, and
the only thing, unless he's a Jerome Ford, but I don't feel like I saw enough of him. So I saw a little bit of Jerome Ford last year, and I was pretty apt to want to keep him. Where Kendrick Miller, I haven't seen enough of that yet to even say, man, I think he's somebody that we hold. Like I'm a little bit more Isaiah. I'm more on the fence of Isaiah Spiller than I am Jerome Ford. Like if I'm comparing what I have as an asset there, I think it feels closer to me to Isaiah Spiller.
And they but the thing is, like some of these guys who are drafted are on these two running back splits. One guy gets hurt, they're moving into that role. Where Miller is, even when Kamara was out, he didn't fill in that role. So
and Jamal Williams was out, and he didn't fill in the role.
Right, he didn't fill in the role.
That's why I said about Spiller. I feel like when Eckler was out, Spiller doesn't fill into the role. They figure out a different way to go, and I kind of feel like that's where it is. Looking down the line, I'm a lot higher on the next guy off the board, Roschon Johnson.
Yeah,
he was 22. He went from 13 to 33, and he's a guy that isn't getting a lot of playing time. But I think he's good at football. Like I feel like he's a player that I'm going to look to probably acquire as we go here over the off season. Like he's a guy I think has staying power. How about Tank Dell? Tank Dell. Tank
Dell. Yeah, sure, he looks good.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? I was in one of my Clown Head leagues, and I saw Nick Chubb when Nick Chubb broke his leg. And a guy in my league, it was a genius play, goes out to the owner of ETN and gives him Tank Bigsby for Jerome Ford. And the trade, it literally, he broke his leg, they make the trade, right? Jerome Ford comes in and goes off. I'm just laughing. I'm like, who makes this trade right now when you're taking a backup running back for a starting running back? Jerome Ford goes up. So the Jerome Ford guy goes to the guy who's on in the playoffs. I trade for him. And I go, this guy's just flashing the bottle, pass him off. But yeah, I think Tank is, he lost his job to Dearness Johnson. He's a number 3 running back right now. I'm not sold on Tank, to be honest with you.
And I feel like he's another Isaiah Spiller. If I were to kind of,
ETN's young yet too. You got to realize ETN's going to play 70% of the snaps or whatever he plays.
But even if ETN has season-ending injury, I'm not sure his Tank Bigsby's job. I think Dearness Johnson's job, and they'll find a guy off the street to be the backup. And
well, you got to understand when you got a guy like Trevor Lawrence you're trying to protect. You also want a guy behind there that's got a little bit of experience, right?
Yeah, and pass pro's a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bigsby fumbled, and I guess I see that as the next guy. A lot of publicity around him. He was my running back 3. So obviously I didn't have this guy ahead of Bijan or Gibbs, but he was my running back 3.
Yep.
And that's Tajay Spears. And I feel like what he is showing now. He's the guy that I think is really the real deal. And as crazy as the whole, when Tennessee won, their last game, and how excited the quarterback was, Tajay Spears was right there with him, high-fiving, and you can almost see the changing of the guard. Like, this is a young, these two guys are now going to war, and this is the new Titan regime, if you will, not to bury Travis or Derrick Henry, but Tajay Spears is going to be a thing,
I mean, the secret was out when he got all the praise at the Senior Bowl. Everyone kind of had jotted the notes down on him, and then he just come out, and then you start watching his film, and then you see he went with the Titans, and it's just like you just seen that, like, all the storms are starting to align for changing the guard, and he is not disappointed. I know I talked deal with a guy in one of my leagues for him, and he said, listen, I got him ranked up there with an Alvin Kamara type player. And that's when I realized, I'm like, if that's how high you have him ranked, I'm not judging. Whatever, we all have our guys. I'm like, this guy, even if he's half of that, he's pretty freaking good. So, and at that point, he hit it right on the dot. The guy is very similar to Alvin Kamara's skill set. He's phenomenal catching the ball. He's tough to take down when he gets it. He runs hard. He's a gem. If you picked him up in that late second, early third round pick, you're smiling.
When I was drafted in the late second, so I had to kind of step up to the top of that to get him. But in Dynasty, I have 16 shares of him, so he's an 18% owned by me, and he's the guy that I'd say I probably was ahead of the masses. Like when I get these higher percentages of players like that, like I have a big percentage of them, then obviously I was higher than them. Now, I'm not sure if it'll come out, and when we start banging in on the receivers, I see Jaden Reed was the pick right behind him. So I, in turn, didn't draft any Jaden Reed. Now, so by comparison, pretty good player, it looks like to me. But I was
really good player
the whole time, and so we'll see what happens. But I was definitely, taking Spears there. Chase Brown, kind of fun to talk about him. He was 27 ADP. He's 20 to 38 is the range. And, so he was,
late
third, kind of time. And he's started getting an opportunity now. He had no opportunity early. And now he feels like, to me, like he's a guy that I can see them turning he could be on the Jerome Ford path. Like, that's kind of how I feel like that went last year in Cleveland. There was an injury that you thought, okay, Hunt's going to go, and Jerome Ford is going to step in behind Chubb in the 1-2 punch. Well, I'm almost wondering, does Mixon go and Chase Brown steps in? It just feels a little bit like that same.
Yeah, Mixon's probably going to be next year's or this year's Dalvin Cook. I don't listen. I don't know if I'm tickled pink about the Chase Brown pick, only because of the production earlier in the year. But when you look at the potential and look at his upside, and that's what I was kind of looking at, I honestly thought that Mixon would have been done out of Cincinnati by now.
Yeah,
shocked that he's still there. I'm shocked that he's still producing. I am a zero fan of Joe Mixon. And it seems like every time I play against him, he scores 30. So he's got the voodoo doll on D Hart.
Yeah.
I agree. I can't see the Bengals, having to sign that big contract with Burrow. Jace coming up. They're going to make a decision with T. Higgins. I can't see them signing Mixon anything longer than they have to. What he's at now, and I could see Chase Brown has done enough where I think he at least gets the opportunity to start.
Or gets a big portion of the 60% of the timeshare.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they won't bring in even a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire to be kind of a secondary piece because of the affiliation with Joe Burrow.
I think he gets the actual bell cow role at one point.
Yeah, but I think
he's shown enough.
Chase Brown will be the higher end of the committee, if you will.
Yeah.
I guess I could see it being very similar to the Jerome Ford in Cleveland, with Kareem Hunt right behind, and with, they have a couple backs in that committee there, but kind of Ford gets the first crack at being the hot hand of the day type of
Yeah.
thing. And I guess
Yeah,
it
I
could
agree.
be Zach Evans, or I'm sorry, Chase Brown as being that. Looking at Zach Evans, he's he was right after him in line. Actually went as high as 18, as low as 39. So kind of all around Chase Brown. The Rams. What did you think of Zach Evans? And what do you think of him?
I thought of all the running backs. I said, I thought really this was the guy, not necessarily by talent, but by just given that option to do it. I felt strongly Cam Akers was a bust. And all signs pointing he's a bust. You can admit it now, Ed.
I still like Cam Akers, but
I get
a bust there, and
he
were kind of
sponsors
right.
you. He throws you $50 a year to throw his name out on your show. I understand, but in all reality, he was a bust. So, and I was banking on that, and I was banking on Zach Evans being the guy who was going to get the opportunity, and Kyren Williams he's just tearing it up, man. I mean, I just can't believe what this guy's been able to do.
So Zach Evans is still another spiller, because even when there wasn't a Kyren,
he wasn't the guy either.
Not the guy. They sign guys off the couch, and then they cut him when they're done with them. Like, they don't. They have Royce Freeman, and they have Reynolds. So they're not Reynolds.
But I was shocked that they didn't give him a chance. Especially with the season kind of going on the downhill slide with back-to-back seasons where Stafford got injured. And I just felt like, all right, at any point, and Zach Evans has been clogging my roster spot, because I'm like, I'll be damned if I drop this guy and he finally gets an opportunity. And we finally thought he was going to get an opportunity, and I don't even know who it was, Doc Rivers or whoever got the start. I'm like, oh my God. Like, how bad is this guy?
Well, that's kind of what I mean. Like, I have 4 shares of him, so I don't have many.
Yeah.
And I did have 15 shares of Chase Brown. So apparently I like Chase Brown better, and you like Zach Evans better. So we'll see how that comes out in the end.
Well, I'm not saying I like him better now, but I did like him better then.
Yeah, okay. Well, I liked him better then, which means that I have him now.
Yeah.
Kind of how that works, just kind of.
You also like Cam Akers over James Cook, so.
Well, that's true. I did. Opportunity, thought that made sense, and I'm still not convinced that Cam Akers isn't bad. I was talking to a Minnesota fan today, and he told me how bad Cam Akers is. I'm like, well, you watch, he's going to take over. He probably won't have a job there, and he might be done for his career now that he's been hurt a second time. But kind of like Dobbins, they remind me of the same guy. How about Izzy Abanikanda? And this guy is like, I don't know. You tell me, what do you think of Izzy Abanikanda?
He just hasn't had the opportunities. Again, he's just one of those guys that are always, behind on the depth chart. And I don't know if that changes with time. But he's not a guy I own any shares of. He's not a guy I coveted in the.
I got some shares of him. I mean, he was drafted, and I was looking here. I wonder Brad, what do you think of these guys? Do you like any of these guys? Because I was looking in all 3 of these guys I have in Dino League, and you're in that league with me. So I thought maybe I'd just trade them all to you.
I'm a big fan of Abanikanda. The Jets they have 2, pretty much studs in front of him, and then they had Carter in front of him as well before until they cut him. So I think he's just buried behind.
He'll be the number 2 role next year, right?
Yeah, without Dalvin there, I don't think they bring anybody else in.
Okay, and that might be when they could cut Michael Carter. That might have been the signal that Abanikanda was actually doing pretty well. But what I can't get beyond on him, I do have a couple shares of him, is that he's 20 years old right now. So he's not even legal age to drink. And I'm like, he's
3 years old right now.
I can't cut him. And kind of like what you said about Zach Evans, I feel like I have 9 shares. It's not a ton, but it's just, I kind of feel like, man, it's.
And you got to think, behind that Jets offensive line, there will probably be plenty of opportunities for other running backs to have their share.
And then I'm just going to lump a couple of the next guys together because they're all kind of like, I don't know, they didn't really amount to much. And I had some that I liked, but they weren't, they weren't very good. Sean Tucker, Dwayne McBride, Evan Hall. Haven't seen much of any of the three of them, in Tampa, in Minnesota, in Indy. They were the next three off the board. Did any of them stick out in your mind? Because none of them have really played. They haven't, stuck out in playing.
Sean Tucker did at first, only because the rumor was that he had taken the number 2 role. He had a hell of a career in Syracuse, kind of guy you're rooting for, especially being a New York guy. So I was kind of disappointed when he did get his opportunity. He wasn't very good. And then you see what Rashad White was able to do when he got his opportunities, and you could tell like there's no changing the guard there. Rashad White is their guy, and I don't think that they have any. Honestly, they got to bring in a new guy because you can't be throwing their 24-year-old running back out there for 80% of the plays and expect them to hold for the entire season.
Well, they'll probably draft one. I just as we're filming this, I see that Tucker was cut today.
I was just going to say I'd be surprised if he was on the roster last year.
Looks like anyway. Oh no, I'm seeing he was a free agent, but
I didn't see him get caught. But I would be shocked if he. I mean, maybe not be shocked if he made the team, but shocked if he was the number 2 back.
Yeah,
I mean, he was undrafted. There's nothing really invested into the guy.
Yeah, I don't see him as cut on sleeper, but I don't see him have any team affiliation either on where I'm looking at his where he is. So unless he got sent to the practice squad or is it going through waivers, something's going on with him roster wise. So I'm not sure, but yeah, he's and then the other guys, McBride, and I didn't like any of them, and they haven't really amounted to much. So I guess I'm not really thinking there. And then McIntosh, we haven't really seen much of him either. And I mean, he's kind of there, but that really takes us down to Keaton Mitchell, who signed on with Baltimore. And what are your thoughts on Keaton Mitchell? He was 57 overall, so late, in the 5th round is where he was coming off the board.
Well, obviously, anybody that watches football realizes that he's a pretty good football player. He's just in that offense where it could be Keaton Mitchell, it could be Gus Edwards for the week. I mean, they just keep rolling guys through. It's a very tough. It's almost like trying to pick the Chiefs wide receiver that's going to go off for you, or you know what I mean. It's just a very difficult situation to predict. But if you're in a deep league, for flex position type player, he's an easy pickup. Obviously, we're not sure what's going to happen next year with the God, I'm drawing the name blank.
Dobbins.
Dobbins. Oh my God, yeah. It's been so long since he's played. I forgot his name. What's going to happen there with Dobbins? Gus Edwards is. He's a Baltimore faithful. Hopefully, he retires Baltimore. So I think it's always going to be a timeshare committee backfield. It's a guy that you want on your roster, but it's also a guy if you got to absolutely depend on him to get you that championship. It's a little sketchy. You know what I mean? That you have to go there. Hopefully his opportunities opens up because a guy his caliber needs more than 7 touches in a game.
Well, I mean, Dobbins is in the Akers class, in the Jonathan Taylor class. So those guys are all like free agents after this year. This is their 4th year on their rookie deal. So they're kind of all, moving on. And so I'm not sure if Dobbins returns to Baltimore kind of thing. It almost feels like Keaton Mitchell could be the guy. I have 0 shares in Dynasty of him. So, I mean, I like him. I like him a lot, but he's just a guy that I didn't get to.
Yeah.
And sometimes I that kind of is the way I draft. Like there's players like that I like and I just don't get to. I mean, I don't have a very many Nakulas either. I just didn't get to him. Like I didn't have him on my list back in May. And when you don't have him on your list back in May, you just don't get him. You just don't get him.
It took him a while before he even was elevated off the practice squad. You know what I mean?
And I mean, I was just picking other slugs that didn't amount to anything, instead of those guys, I guess. And I guess that's why I say, you just go take your shots at your guys, and hopefully a couple of your guys work. And if you have a lot of dart throws, I guess those guys that come out of the back end in the middle of the year, those would be the guys I probably moved on from in training camp, because I didn't see anything from them that told me that, hey, we need to keep them on the team. And then they go to practice squad. They're like, okay, yeah, probably not a guy for, to keep going with. But that's kind of I feel like that's the running back room. I'll be shocked if somebody comes from down below Keaton Mitchell, at this point. Like, I think we've kind of seen what things are there. I think looking back, we're not going to think of this running back class as anything ultra special, as crazy as that sounds. I mean, three running backs, is that, or maybe four. I know Shane, put up these dynamite numbers, but it feels very, very 1 or 2 year centric to me. I mean, there's been a lot of great running backs for 2 years. There's a guy for the Texans a couple years ago that just freaking mashed for 2 years, but then just went away, and drawing a blank on who that was. But I guess I feel like it's a little bit of that, or maybe Jay Ajayi, like they're good for 2 or 3 years, and then it's just over. And
we'll see. I mean, his body size obviously is not in his favor, but if you touch the ball 10 times in a game and get 126 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns and have the seat on the bench, I guess. I don't know. He's good, though. He's good.
How would you compare Shane to Keaton Mitchell?
The speed is similar, but what makes a Shane different is just his agility. It's just different. I can't explain it. It's just different. It's like he moonwalks. It's so weird. Like, he cuts, and it's just like he glides through the holes. It's not, he don't run through the holes. He glides through the holes. I've never seen anyone run like it. That's why I always was just fascinated with him. When I'm watching the running back class, I've never seen a guy like this before. And it was funny because when a scout was doing an evaluation, I was watching the scout, and the scout said the same thing. We can't even compare him. I've never seen anyone run like this. So I'm like, all right, so my eyes aren't lying to me, because I haven't either.
Yeah, no, I think you're onto it. And I think, producer Brad, likes Gibbs. I think, that'll be an interesting, to see how that works out. We might end up saying he was the running back in the draft.
Very well could be.
I could see us coming away saying that. I mean, it's kind of what happened with the draft in 2020. We had all these running backs at the top of the draft. We had, CEH, and then Jonathan Taylor, then Dobbins and Akers. We had all 4 of them. And yet, as we look back, beyond Taylor, there wasn't much there.
No.
Even though there was a lot of talent there just wasn't much there. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see how these guys come off the board, these 4. And, when we start to look back in a couple of years and compare. And I kind of like to do that. I like to look back at 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I should say, when we had Najee Harris and Etienne and that class. And then we look back just, last year to the Walker and Breece Hall class and just to see how they've all kind of transpired.
Mm-hmm.
I guess back in the Etienne class with Javonte Williams that year too. That's kind of, a couple of years ago's class, and how it's kind of amazing that the CMC guys, Kamara, Mixon, Jacobs, Barkley,
wow.
you kind of, all those other guys everybody was chasing, but if you just had Barkley all those years, you'd probably be pretty happy with the answer. If you just had even Mixon all those years,
mm-hmm.
For some of the years we had Dalvin Cook, you'd be happy with the answer. Like, you'd really actually be happier, with the exception of maybe Jonathan Taylor. I can understand you'd be pretty happy with him as a whole, maybe not this year, but as a whole over a couple of years. But if you were comparing CEH to Dalvin Cook for the last 4 years, how would you be feeling right now? And yet, that would have been an interesting trade, 101. So, I guess I kind of try to keep that in my wheelhouse, in my memory bank too. So, well, we beat up the running backs, and I guess we'll say, so long for now, and we'll come back with wide receivers next week and break those down. So that'll be exciting. That's
Receivers,
kind of
baby.
our wheelhouse. But yeah, that's the running backs of 2023 rookies, and stay tuned for 2024 after we're all done with these 23s when we start to preview those 24s. But good luck in the playoffs. And for Dan, I'm Ed. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, guys.